Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Comparing Ways to Evaluate Claims and Benefits webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. Afterwards, we will conduct a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Thursday, June 5th, 2014. I'd now like to turn the conference over to BuzzBack.
Thank you for joining us today, everyone. I'd like to introduce Silvana Milankova, SVP Research and Strategic Direction. Silvana joined BuzzBack in 2006 and focuses on early-stage product development, packaging, and communications research. She has a versatile background conducting both qualitative and quantitative research in a variety of industries, including technology, CPG, and healthcare, and specializes in early-stage product development, decision-making, as well as communication research. Fluent in 5 languages and an experienced global researcher, she brings over 15 years of client-side experience. Silvana, please go ahead.
Thank you, Melanie. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. What we will do in the next 20 or so minutes is basically talk about the role claims play when it comes to product development or launches, and what makes some better than others. What are some key considerations when you're thinking of developing or evaluating claims or benefits? We'll do this by looking at a few different methods that researchers have employed evaluating claims and understanding what they mean. And we'll focus mostly on the pharma OTC side, but we'll show we have a lot of experience in this area. We'll show you a quick example of other categories as well. And we'll finish with basically explaining what may be some broader considerations that you can take away to your businesses, even if you're not exactly in these categories. In addition to this, what we're hoping to do is draw attention to how diagnostics can play a role in understanding more about claims, not just prioritizing them, but actually figuring out what they mean or how they might fit with your broader strategy. And we'll do that by showing you a few projective or enabling techniques we've used along the way successfully in our own research as well as our clients to accomplish this. But just take a step back. Let's now understand why claims. What is important about claims? We have a lot of clients, across the board coming to us and focusing more and more on claims these days, for different reasons. Some have new product launches and are trying to understand how to talk about that product. Some have really complicated, pharmaceutical products that they need to be able to communicate both to the professionals and sometimes to patients. And others are just doing, extensions or relaunches and need to figure out how to maybe best optimize and go that way. In addition, we have heard a lot of clients have different methods they've used. Some have just decided on one and settled on it and not really questioned it, while others have experimented with multiple approaches, but I'm not exactly sure which one is better, if one is giving them more than the other, and how to proceed. And that's kind of how this organically evolved into a research and research project for us. And we've done it across, as I said, multiple categories. I will show you an example from the CPG world, but the focus today will be more on the OTC pharma side. What about claims? How do you go about it? There are a lot of things you can consider. We've focused on a few here, but generally it has to do with are you articulating it? How are you connecting to the product or its specific benefit? Which one is the main one, or how can you explain this directly? What are you going to be using these claims for? What media they will go on, or in some cases, is it approved by legal, especially in the pharmaceutical area? And a lot of the questions we get are also around this, well, what's the optimal number of claims? How many should I have? And even though there is not a right answer, or one right answer, I should say, for everybody, there has been a lot of research, and some of it actually comes from the academia. We just had a big discussion with 2 professors from Georgetown's Business School who wrote this article about the power of 3. And they actually conducted a study which is really interesting, and they shared their paper with us around giving people descriptions and figuring out at which point they don't remember anything. So they started with 3, 4, and then went to more statements. And what the research basically shows is that after 3, people don't really pay attention. So that and other literature would probably say that you don't want more than 3. Sometimes 1 or 2 could be enough. But it's just a starting point, and it kind of ties into this idea of not just prioritizing, but actually tying that to memory, figuring out how many things people can actually play back to you over time. Why do claims matter? I mean, there are a lot of reasons. These are not exclusive, and it could be more than these. But generally, people are trying to use claims in the OTC and pharmaceutical world to make people relate to what their issue is. So they want the claim to describe what the patient's situation is, what a doctor is trying to address. Sometimes, we want them to motivate purchase, but also sometimes we just want them to differentiate. And in the very broader context, we also can be looking at claims in understanding of how it impacts your product, your brand, or even being a part of your broader communication strategy. So we're trying to understand how they fit with that whole strategy. When it comes to pharma and OTC, there are a lot of things that make a good benefit or a claim, but here are some of the main ones. You want it to be relevant, you want to get people's attention. Of course, you want it to be supported by science and clinical evidence, so it has to have the backing, but also, has to be okayed by legal, which, all of these things together with everything else you're trying to communicate could create a challenge of balancing your message with the communication. So how do you tie the two together and make that most effective? And I think this is kind of where research comes in, because research can help you along the way. And we work, in different stages at different, companies. But it could be as simple as identifying who you need to talk to and how you need to talk to them. So you're understanding them and figuring out what their needs and concerns are. It could be about creating a set of claims, figuring out which territories resonate with these people and which ones maybe are the main ones. And it could be as simple as finding out which is the top one or the top ones, what is the most compelling of these things that I can say about my product, and why is that? Like, what about this specific claim makes it resonate the most? So how we got to this point of comparing different methods, years ago, claims did not have a very standard way of evaluation. We could do internal brainstorms. I remember sitting in a room with people and us just discussing and figuring out, well, what can we say or how should we say it, or going just directly to legal and, taking what they were able to give us. Sometimes, we would be driven by a lot of what R&D can do or say. We used a bunch of qualitative, which, would give us at least some direction. And, in some cases, we just trial and error. We would just go in and try one thing and then see how it did in the market or, in communications, and then go back to the drawing board. Now we have a lot more systematic approaches available to us, and I can see, in the past years, a lot of the choice methods have been used very successfully in evaluating claims and benefits. Other things to look at is like sequential monadic approaches, which are more of a rating approach, or even more qualitative, at different stages, maybe before and after as well, has been effective. And this is kind of what we did when we decided which methods to compare or put like side by side when it comes to claim evaluations. We looked at some of the key kind of philosophical undertakings of these methods. So, on one side, if you're looking at the sequential monadic approach, proponents of that might argue that scales are more accurate. They give me more data points, so I can do a lot more analytics. Others would say, well, forced choice is kind of unrealistic. You're showing people things that they might never ever see, in the real world. On the other hand, people who are more in kind of the choice camp would say, well, scales are really hard to understand. Midpoints of the scales don't really differentiate. What's the difference between a 3 and a 4 on a 5-point scale? Others might even say, well, I'm doing global work and I know that different, people in different countries are interpreting scales differently. So how do I reconcile this? And also, some people believe that you can evaluate more claims with a choice approach like max diff because you're able to iterate a little bit better. So we took all that in and thought, okay, so let's take a look at all of these methods and see, does one make a difference? And if there is one that makes a difference, can we understand why that is? Like, what does it bring to the table that others maybe don't? And, we have, as I mentioned, quite a lot of experience in CPG. That's kind of where most of our claims work started at. We've done a lot of internal research as our research on research program, as well as we've partnered with a lot of clients and also conducted hundreds of claim studies with our clients. One of the partnerships we have is with 3M, which is something that we've published and presented. But the idea here was, again, to try to understand as a starting point, is there a better method when it comes to claims research? And I won't give you too much of the detail of our CPG work, but just a quick example to show you what some of the methods were and what kind of we find out there. We created a better for you cookie, which made up a concept, and we also made up about 15 claims for this cookie. It was just for us to be able to compare the methods. It's not a real product, but that wasn't